Travis and Taylor, welcome to the show. There's two of you on this one with me, so what I might get you both to do is one after the other, just sort of go through your backgrounds and walk us through individually what you've both kind of done, and then bring us through to the current day. Maybe if we go Travis first, and then Taylor, I'll go to you second.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us, Andy. We're both co-owners of ORKA Performance. I'm a physiotherapist by trade, originally from the east coast of Canada, from Prince Edward Island. Came out to the west coast right after graduation and kind of worked all over the place, but primarily was in big box kind of physio clinics, short treatment times, lots of volume, lots of machines and hop packs and things like that. And Taylor and I first met each other when we were working with a semi-professional soccer team here in Canada, and he was the strength and conditioning coach. I was the physio doing sideline care. We kind of collaborated on a lot of clients just across the city, but then very quickly realized that there was a bit of a demand in the private sector for good quality performance rehab and that transition between rehab to performance.
Cool. And then over to you, Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, for me, very similar story. I feel like all strength coaches have the same story, is that we played at a decent level of sport, but we were always just bang average and never made it. So I think S&C for me was a pathway that I could stay involved in sport and keep pushing the needle and through a different lens. And so for me, it was just, again, undergrad in kinesiology at the University of Saskatchewan and took a deeper dive into what kind of human performance looks like, and realized that was probably a path that I wanted to pursue. And I was, just working for that soccer club and realized that wasn't my lifelong career, and decided to take a shot and quit that with no backup job at all. And I just had a temporary thought that I was going to work with a few athletes in the city and then start applying for jobs elsewhere. And I landed, oddly enough, an Irish dancing academy out of the soccer space. So started training a few of those dancers, and then it just kind of kicked off and snowballed and got more soccer groups, and ended up with 35 club teams at basically a school weight room that we were renting, and realized that this was probably a potential that we could do something with this. And it was during COVID that we decided that Trav and I, really wanted to take a dive on trying to make this happen in the city of Calgary. There wasn't much in Canada per se in terms of what we were looking at from an integrated model of care. And that was when we took the dive into ORKA. So 2021, we launched the new facility, and we haven't looked back. It's been an absolutely wild journey. And I think for us, we've always had a North Star for us, is that we want to deliver outcomes here in Calgary. And with that in mind, it guides everything that we do, from our systems to our people to everything. It comes down to us wanting to be able to deliver outcomes. So that was kind of where we got to where we're at today.
Cool. And obviously you guys, I guess for a better term, at some point have collaborated together by the sounds of it, and then the vision for ORKA sort of came together. What allowed you both to sort of think, this is the person that I should set up a facility with? Like what was it, I guess, that you both sort of maybe appreciated? I'm not trying to make this like a fluffy bonding session, but what was it about the other person in this arrangement where you sort of thought like, okay, that's the person that I should start this with? Not just because one of you is a physio in S&C, but in terms of like, what did you align on that made you think this should be a good idea?
You want to tackle this one, Trav, or me?
I can start for sure. I think initially it was kind of just a physio and S&C thing. I think in Canada, the way the institutions kind of bring us through our physio programs is we end up entering practice with just the bare bones in terms of a skill set, and really have massive amounts of blind spots and gaps when it comes to strength and conditioning principles, and really bringing the athlete even past the acute stage. So just in conversations with Taylor, you kind of don't know what you don't know, but through talking to him, I started to realize just the gaps in my own practice. So it was nice to kind of link up with somebody with that skill set, and it kind of allowed me to dive into some different rabbit holes and workflows to upskill myself from a CPD standpoint. There's really not that many strength and conditioning coaches in the area that are dabbling with rehab and performance-based rehab. So Taylor was definitely one of few that was reliable for me to kind of refer people into from a pipeline standpoint. And then I think just through our conversations and starting to work together, we figured out we complement each other fairly well. There's lots of things that Taylor excels at that I don't, in terms of, branding and marketing and just creating community partnerships and things like that. And I think we were both very, very green from a leadership standpoint. We had never owned businesses before, and we very quickly learned all the snares and snags that you can get into with entrepreneurship. But I think it was just, again, just a a complementary relationship. And we knew going into it, you see the stats all the time that a high percentage of businesses fail just because of the partnership and the two partners aren't compatible. And I came from a clinic that had 7 owners, and I saw just the issues in terms of just landing on, an agreement on certain things and executing ideas and implementing programs, just because there was such high volume of owners. So I knew I'd only want to go into partnership with maybe one person. And again, it was just a good fit, I think, from the get-go.
Cool. How about you, Taylor?
Yeah. I think for me, people laugh at this story all the time when I tell it, because it's simple in the fact that, as a business partnership, you want to have that person that has a skill set that you don't have. And I think that that's something that Trav and I have that is rare in a sense, is that, there's so many things that he's brilliant at, that when I was working with him, he was treating me at the time, and I was like, this guy's a weapon on the table. Super smart as a physiotherapist, and all around just a really good person, which are key pieces for me. And our team know this. I am the most unorganized, ADHD, chaotic guy in the world, and Trav is the most organized. And so for me, I thrive on being on the floor in the community with people, and creating systems and frameworks, and the organizational side has never been my strong suit. But I think how we blended the two together, and Trav is slowly getting me to start to create some of these systems, which isn't my natural way of doing things, but we've developed a lot just as the two of us together. And I think, again, we just complement each other and continue to do so.
Cool. I'll invoice you guys at the end for the couples therapy, but we'll move on to the sort of nuts and bolts of today's conversation. One of the sort of, I guess, technical topics that I wanted to chat to you guys about was ACLs first. We'll get on to sort of like your facility and how it runs a bit later, and I'm sure there'll be snippets along the way. But I know this is an area you guys do a lot of work, and it's one of those things where we always talk about ACLs, and I think a lot of people listening probably think they know everything there is to know about ACLs because we just see a lot of volume of them in general. But I'd really like to know how you guys kind of set up the rehab process for an ACL post-op. I guess, like, to go broad first, what is the sort of like workflow, if we call it that, for injured athlete comes in through the door day one with you guys? How do you package that moving forwards for them?
Go ahead, Tay.
Yeah, I think for us, we really wanted to start to look, and Trav can kind of dive into the X's and O's of the rehab side of things, but we really wanted to be able to reverse engineer, again, that outcome that I talked to the beginning. And that outcome really is tied into the foundation of what type of experience is this client going to get. And the goal for us always was, how can we deliver, elite level care, stuff that professional athletes get, to the amateur, collegiate, semi-pro, and weekend warrior. That was the goal for us. So we reverse engineered what we wanted that client experience to look like. And I think we hit a bunch of roadblocks along the way and continue to evolve that offering. But it really comes down to us in that first interaction with the individual in a discovery call of really trying to learn what they're looking for out of a provider. Because I think that's really, really important, is that we need to be the right fit for them and they need to be the right fit for us. And so we can kind of map that journey for them right off the bat and start to build some trust, which I think is the ultimate piece that we need to continue to have through the entire journey. And then really, once we've had that discovery call, they're going to go into our assessment pathway, which is a 60-minute one-on-one assessment. And they're going to be one-on-one with that physio, going through basically every nook and cranny of what this rehab can look like. And ultimately, we tell our team we want to map that journey for them on day one, so they have a true understanding of what is this process going to look like from the day that they show up here to the day that they get out of surgery, to a month down the road, to 9 months down the road. What are those goals and kind of criterias that we have for them? And then from there, we always just tell our athletes, as soon as you're feeling pretty good post-surgery, you're going to come in and it's 1 or 2 physio sessions a week, and your daily kind of extension drills, restoration, range of motion stuff that they're going through. And then they can kind of dive down either a session by session route or a membership route where they can go into a smaller group rehab kind of model. It's supervised by the physio, but they don't pay for the one-on-one care. And they also get the community side of it, because that's a big piece with ACLs, is that they lose their identity as a team sport athlete or as an athlete, and they don't really have a replacement for that. So from a mental health lens, that group session has really helped solidify some really important connections for our athletes in the community. And they really lean on each other, which has been amazing to see. And it's really kind of planted that seed of culture in our facility as well. So they'll go into that rehab membership or continue session by session. And then we just keep moving the needle stage by stage. We've broken it up into 5 phases, and we have our entrance and exit criteria basically for everything mapped out. And as soon as we hit certain testing criteria, we can move into the next phase. And we keep moving individuals through that pathway from start to finish, and also have them transition into the performance department when we kind of hit that mid-end stage as well. So that's kind of a overarching view of the process. But Trav, maybe you can add a bit more context to it.
I just want to jump in real quick before you do, Trav. There was one question that came up, Taylor, when you were going through that then in my mind, which was, you start with a discovery call, which I think is a great idea, by the way. Have you always done that, or is it something that you can afford to do with the luxury of having a good clientele and a sort of busy book of business? Because I mean, somebody starting out might go, well, I'm just going to take anyone that comes through the door because I've got to keep the lights on. Is it something you intentionally always did, or is it something that it's a luxury that you've been able to adopt over time?
Yeah, we've always done it. And, I think it's a really good point that in the early stages, you might not have your choice of who you get to rehab, and it might be everyone. And I think the positive that you can draw out of something like that is that you're ultimately going to have so many different conversations with different people, and it's going to allow you to dive into the communication side and really get an understanding if you're communicating this journey correctly. Because if they understand it, then you're off to a really good start. And from there, you can also kind of continue to work through, well, do they have objections? Is it financial? Is it time? Is it spousal? Like, there's so many different objections that we can look at. And you can work on all of those pieces, because we tell physios in our kind of business module on one of our courses is that it doesn't matter if you work for a company or you're working for yourself. Like, you are a business, because you have to manage your own caseload. And so those discovery calls from, you have no clients to that, it just gives you reps on communicating, and it allows you to set the expectations for what is going to be needed to deliver that outcome, because that's not something everyone always understands.
Cool. No, thank you for that. Sorry, Travis, I cut into you there just as you were about to go.
So. No, all good. That's all gold. I think just to layer onto it from a rehab lens, there's some concrete studies that show that there's a large percentage of clients, ACL specifically in the private sector, who just leave rehab at around month 3. Right. And then you start to look at some of the length of times of these rehabilitations in pro sport, return to sports 9 months, 12 months. So if there's such a high volume leaving at month 3, I always introspectively look at the profession and be like, what are we doing wrong here that these individuals are just, again, not trusting us enough to take them to mid and end stage rehab? And it goes to commitment and vision, like Tay talked about, but also skill set as well. And you look at the re-rupture rates in the ACL populations, and you see in the private sector, it can be anywhere in the 30s, 33%, pro sport less than 5%. In my mind, I'm like, this is the same surgery. This is the same injury. So why is there such a massive gap in re-rupture rates? What's the common denominator? It's likely the rehab framework and the structure, from the technical drills to, again, them staying ingrained into your different workflows and pipelines in the rehab and performance departments. So we wanted to figure out different streamlines to make sure we could service these athletes from A to Z, whether it's our sports med physician diagnosing the ACL tear and then using her connections to get them into orthopedics to get the surgery done as quickly as possible, to the rehab team taking them up to the point of transition, and then a referral pathway into the strength and conditioning coaches so they can work on some on-field work, some end-stage power, and that return to performance process.
What are I think one of you alluded to it earlier, I think it might have been you, Taylor. What are the sort of 5 phases as you guys see it, and what are the sort of key intentions of those phases? And the reason I ask is you speak to people from different sports teams or different facilities, and everyone has their own verbiage of what different phases are for different injuries. But I think regardless of what those phases are called, if you can tease out, what they're called, but also what are your key metrics or what are your key focuses within each one?
Go ahead, Trev.
Yeah, so I think the first one is obviously testing starting to like gain some popularity now across North America and the world, whether it's dynamometry for strength or different, we're getting away from using the goniometer for range of motion. There's different like devices for that. And then obviously dual force plates and things like that. We try to make sure that testing is done to kind of guide each one of the phases. So we're not just testing at month 3, 6, and 9, or just at return to sport. Testing very much is like a staple within our facility to guide what the program is going to be and help us identify blind spots. It also helps keep our practitioners honest so that if we set out in a certain phase to address, let's say, quad strength as a stimulus, testing helps us figure out if we've actually gotten those adaptations. And if the answer is no, either the athlete didn't do their shit or our programming needs some refinement or something like that. So it really keeps our practitioners at ORKA honest as well. But we test very frequently throughout all the stages, and testing really dictates us going into the next stage. I would view it as basically, 5 stages at ORKA. The first one really is just get the knee calm, keep it calm, and get your extension and gait back. That's really what we're doing with the ACLs. Biggest like snares there, I think, a lot of physios now are starting to dive into strength and conditioning principles, and they want to like very quickly get to the sexy drills, and they're forgetting the basics, right? So we see like a lot of clients coming in who, there just wasn't focus put on the simple things in the first couple weeks, and they're still swollen or they're missing range and things like that. So it's really basic stuff in the first 2 weeks, and making sure that that's there, because we always say like you can't win the rehab in the first 6 weeks, but you can lose it. And if at week 6, 8, or 12 we're still swollen or we're missing range of motion, we're going to be screwed when we get to the strength and power and things like that. So early doors, it's just get the knee calm, get your range back, keep it calm, get your gait. And then we get into phase 2, which is kind of just restoring key lift patterns. So you're looking at restoring your squat, your hinge, your lunge, different things that you're going to need when you get to that strength capacity phase. Moving from there into the strength capacity phase, that's where we're starting to load and really overcome that inhibition that's there through the musculature from the surgery and the early swelling. And then phase 4 and 5, we're kind of just moving along that chaos continuum, like kind of Matt Tabner has kind of showed us there, where we're just increasing from mild chaos to moderate to high chaos. That's where our change of direction stuff starts to begin. We're really working in some neurocognitive stuff with the Switched On app or virtual reality, taking away vision, auditory, things like that, and trying to mimic whatever field of play or whatever scenarios they're going to encounter when they get back to the ice, the snow, or the field and things like that.
One of the things you said then that really resonated, and I think I've probably lost count private practice adopting clients or athletes on, you make a really good point of getting it calm early. And I know it sounds really simple and basic, but also the part where you said rushing, physios rushing athletes into sort of like, associated S&C type movements. And I think I've seen it commonly where a physio has, and I'm a physio myself, so I'm not, pointing the professional finger. People rush athletes back to squats, lunges, things like that before they're ready. And through the rehab process, you get this trend where quite often open chain knee strength is tested and it's worked on early, but it's not finished off. They haven't closed down the asymmetry gap enough. And then at, month 5, month 6, month 7, wherever they are, when they're trying to do some more dynamic stuff, they're just not quite tolerating stuff. And you look back in their testing and you see an unchecked box early on where they're really hammering squats, lunges, even maybe some jumping stuff and thinking about running. And then you still see a glaring asymmetry at open chain knee strength, and they just haven't covered the basics. So I appreciate you sort of saying that. And it makes me wonder for you guys, and I'm not trying to make you get in any trouble with anyone, but is there things that you think you do really well in your process where you've seen common issues or mistakes happen elsewhere?
I would say 2 things. And Tay, you can come at it from your lens as well, but I think our organization does a really good job at reverse engineering. So kind of just to add to your point there, Andy, like if we take something like a counter movement jump, we can see that they potentially have big asymmetries, let's say in eccentric braking or deceleration. But as physios and as strength coaches, we need to kind of take a step back and reverse engineer that and realize that that could be coming from a number of different things. And our testing doesn't end there. Yeah. Like they could just have really poor ankle dorsiflexion. And if that is figured out, all of a sudden those asymmetries start to go away in the eccentric deceleration and braking phase. And it was nothing to do with rate of force development or braking forces at all. It was more to do with mobility above or below. Yeah. Right? Same thing with, to your point on quad strength, poor restoration of eccentric quad strength. We know that inhibition and building back that mass is probably the lowest hanging fruit for our ACLs. And lack of focus or attention to detail in the early phases, that will continue to come back and bite us when we're doing our double leg CMJs and our single leg CMJs. And that's not necessarily anything to do with plyometrics or jumping. It's just poor restoration of the foundational pillars in phase 2 or phase 1. Yeah. Right? So I think our team at ORKA does a really good job at just taking a step back and looking at the whole picture. And that even goes into running mechanics, knowing that things happening on the right side through early and late swing could be driven from the left side through toe off, or things happening through toe off could be something that's going wrong during touchdown. So we're always kind of thinking forwards and back and trying to identify, really not really chasing the victim, but trying to identify the culprit of whatever it is that we're dealing with. That's one of the biggest ones for us. I don't know, Tay, if you'd add anything else onto that.
Yeah, I would. I think there's one thing that I feel we do really well on is that sometimes, I mean, we've touched on it here. We're going to get an athlete that didn't start with ORKA, and they might be referred in at 6 months, 7 months, 9 months, and they come in and their testing's a complete disaster. And oftentimes it is a referral from another allied health practitioner in the community just to get testing, just to figure out where we're at. And sometimes it's a little too late at that window where we start to see these big deficits and we're still missing extension. Like there's a lot of things going on. And I think something we've managed to do really, really well is continue with that concept of collaboration in the community, because at the end of the day, if we're able to educate people on A, how we rehab ACLs, B, this is the current findings, how are we going to fix it, and C, you're going to get this athlete back and they can stay on your caseload, I think it helps us a ton. And then the second piece is just that we now need to communicate very, very carefully to that athlete that they're expecting to go back to sport in the next 2 months and they are nowhere near close. And so then it comes back to, okay, how do we present this data in a way that they're actually going to absorb it in that moment and not be completely gutted? And then how do we map the journey for them? Because they likely haven't had that map before, or they've just been like, yeah, you're going to return at 9 months. So how do we remap it for them on like, these are the things that we need to work on, and this is how we're going to get here. And this might be the timeline, but we're going to utilize our data, and it might be sooner, it might be later. But trust us in this process. We're going to get this managed. We're going to take care of it. And I'm going to work with your physio to make sure that we get you to that finish line. So just communicating on both sides of the coin, both with the parents, the athletes, the practitioner that referred in, because I think that's only going to help us in the long term of better understand how we can support these athletes going through a difficult rehab.
Obviously,
I'd probably...
Karen.
Sorry, Eddie. I was just going to say, I'd add one more thing to that, just from like an acute lens, maybe. In terms of like what we think we do well, but maybe also like when individuals come into our facility, what we see potentially not done well. Yeah. In Canada, a lot of clients will leave their surgical institution with a protocol from that surgical institution. And I think it's similar across North America to a sense, but in my opinion, like a lot of these protocols are a bit disastrous, right? Because it stops us as physios, at least, from looking at the individual who's in front of us and really trying to troubleshoot what their deficits are. It gives them this kind of cookie cutter protocol that may or may not fit. And acutely, there's a lot of talk in the rehab world about atrophy of the quads or certain muscle groups. But something I heard this year from Alan Murdoch that I really, really liked, and it resonated with me, was just, what about atrophy of shapes and positions? We talk about atrophy of quads, but what about atrophy of shapes and ranges of motion? So our team from right out of the gates is starting to work at what are the shapes and positions they need to get in for max velocity acceleration? what do they need to get in down the track in terms of reactive strength? And it could be something as simple as, okay, I know at mid-stage I'm going to be working them towards a pogo. So I'm going to start, even when they're non-weight bearing, if they had a meniscus repair, just working on the cyclical action of dorsiflexion, plantar flexion of the ankle, non-weight bearing, just to help that neurocognitive piece a little bit, to make it easier for them down the track. Since we switched gears and started to do that and kind of proceeded with the end goal and the shapes in mind, the rehab process has been exponentially smoother for our athletes going through, and we've probably cut not even weeks, months off a return to sport, because I don't think it's realistic to go through, protocol phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and then once you get to 4, that's where it's like, okay, now we got plyometrics and a little bit of agility ladder work, single leg Bosu ball work, and then you're back to sport. Like, there's too big of a gap there between the plinth and the field or the ice. So I think acutely proceeding with kind of those end goals in mind, reverse engineering the end goals and making sure that the acute drills are in the shapes and postures that athlete needs to be into is massive.
I think people just like the straight line approach, don't they? They like, I do this, then I do that, rather than thinking, well, actually, you've probably got, you've got the knee joint itself that you're rehabbing, but you've also probably got this multi-stream rehab approach you need to be on, where you've got from early doors, as soon as they're walking, movement pattern related progressions as well, like return to running based movements. Your S&C wider than just the knee is also another stream. So you've got like a minimum of 3 conveyor belts that you've got to have them on at the same time. And I think people just don't want to think of it in that way, or they're stubborn to, because it's a lot, right? Because then you've got each of those conveyor belts has their own phases as well. So you've got this multi-stream, multi-phase approach going on at all times. And it's complex. So
and as a new physio, I remember too, I just wanted the protocols. Give me the protocols. And if I had a new injury come in, you're like, well, where's the protocol for this? Because it takes the clinical reasoning out of it. It's so easy. You just feel like you need to follow along. But then as you start to, exactly, right? But as you start to get years into practice under your belt and you start to uncover some of your blind spots, you realize just how many gaps are in those protocols and how unindividualized those streamlines are.
So people come to you guys for, obviously you treat them in-house and rehab them in-house. Obviously it sounds like you also have people come to get tested. In terms of testing, what do you have? What are you using, and why is it people are sending them to you to do that? Like, what are the tools that you're using to test and get some objectivity in the process?
Yeah, we've tried to find a balance in it, and I think it started in 2019. We brought in the force frame way back when valve wasn't very big, and we got the first force frame, and we played around with it and starting to introduce some objective metrics. And I think it took us a good 6 months to think of, okay, now we have it and we've been able to get some tests on it, reps on it, what really matters for us. And then we started to realize right away the impact that it can make, both from us understanding where the rehab's going to go and where we're at right now, and also from the athlete having a sense of comfort knowing that they're moving in the right direction and getting that dual feedback on both sides. So we knew right then and there that we needed to invest in everything. So we've introduced the full suite from Valve, from Smart Speed to the force plates to the force frame, Nord board, Dynamo, basically everything that you can think of from the traditional testing stuff. And then, like Trav alluded to, some other smaller details in tech, from breakaway to the M trigger to VR, the compacts, a lot of these smaller tools that we're using along the way. But yeah, I think the testing for us, it really has allowed us to truly know that we're moving the needle and we're not guessing. And it's also given the athletes love testing. They're so eager to get their testing done because they know that they're going to see some improvements. And it's little micro wins along that whole journey that we're trying to engineer as well into this. And it's helped a ton, but those are the main pieces that we've added.
Cool. And the breakaway, how long have you been using that? Obviously it's sort of like we're going through sort of like a evolution of markerless, I should say, sort of tech to look at kinematics at the moment. Are you using that more for sort of like asymmetry based information, or more as a kind of performance metric, or both?
Go ahead, Trav.
I'd say a bit of both for sure. At mid-stage, we'll definitely start with some evaluations of acceleration and max velocity, and we'll look at everything from projection to limb exchange to thigh angle separation. I think it helps our physios kind of help troubleshoot some of that stuff before those athletes get into the performance team's hands, so that they can really just kind of drive down speed and they're not reverse engineering back mobility and things like that. So it's been definitely an upskilling process, like with anything, as we've started to use it, because we've had to figure out, okay, what metrics are we going to look at, what matters, what's normal for some of these metrics, and then also, like, do we actually have systems and workflows to address things that are coming up on this app? Yeah. But I think we've figured out now how to kind of seamlessly streamline it in with our dual force plates and things like that. So if we see something like contact time and max velocity running that is a bit problematic, then we'll reverse engineer that back and say, okay, well, how was their RSI and contact time in their double and single leg drop jumps or their 10-5 hop test? And is there a problem there as well? If the answer is yes, even a step further, okay, well, do they actually have the muscle tendon unit capacity in the gastrocsoleus complex? Is this a vertical ankle stiffness issue? Are they being given just calf work, or do they need pogos, or do they need both? So our team's kind of tried to refine that process a little bit, but we're definitely looking at lots of asymmetry, and then again, trying to tie it back to kind of some of the earlier tests we might be doing in the rehab.
Obviously, all things Vald plug into the hub, so it's really easy to aggregate all your data and see it in one space. But obviously, if you're then using other pieces of tech like Breakaway and other things as well, you've got lots of different pieces of hardware and software and reports in separate places. How do you guys, or do you guys kind of pool it all together for your own eyes, but also to communicate it to athletes?
Yeah, I think that's the joy of us having the tech for longer, is that we're starting to see this not pendulum swing, because it's needed, but the tech is found everywhere now, which is amazing. And the byproduct of that is there's a whole lot of people that absolutely have no clue how to use it, and it's sitting in their clinic. Yeah. And I think we've had the luxury of time to be able to really suss through, lean on the industry leaders of like, what metrics are they seeing, what's reliable, and really refine down what are the pieces that we want to be able to pull on to make a difference. And so when we've had many different renditions of it, but Val's been amazing at just feedback to make the hub better and keep it in one place. And we haven't combined it, all in one package per se, but we do keep a lot of the Val metrics within the hub, some of our questionnaires that we have in there as well. The Breakaway hub on the back end for us is a bit more education in the moment. Like, this is what we're going through. We can obviously track our data, but utilizing it within session to be like, this is what we're seeing, this is where we need to go, or this was really, really good. Let's tap into this side of it now. And then obviously all of our programming is in Team Builder. So there is a few different places that we've kept it, but we also have a hub that we can work off of that we've just created within Google Sheets. Just simplifies all the metrics that we're looking for at each phase: return to run, return to change of direction, and we can just check boxes. So we have a quick overview, but most of the time we're actually just in session looking within the hub, within Breakaway, the different pieces that we're using to either drive intent or to educate.
Cool. I think while we're talking about sort of how you package the reports, let's maybe sort of take a small pivot and segue to your actual facility and kind of what you do there, how it runs, and that kind of stuff. I guess the first question I have is sort of, what is the lay of the land in Canada specifically? Like, I can speak on behalf of what England and America's like, but what is it like in Canada to open a facility and get it off the ground? I know that's a really broad question, but I'll let you roll with it, Travis.
Yeah, I would say when we first opened doors 3.5 years ago, I would say it would be hard to come by in Canada, a performance-based rehab facility in the private sector.
Yeah.
You would walk into 99% of physiotherapy clinics, and you may run into a great practitioner, but definitely not a great space in terms of something that could facilitate kind of A to Z rehab. The pendulum's kind of swung a little bit now in Canada. I would say you're starting to see more and more of these performance-based rehab facilities pop up, which is absolutely brilliant. There's lots of industrial spaces in Canada that are big enough to house these facilities. I think where the solution needs to happen for people who are opening up the business is, do you have enough arms to the business that you can see your athletes one-on-one for extended periods of time and still ensure your margins are such that you can keep the lights on and pay rent. Because a lot of those big volume-based physio clinics, the reason they're volume-based is because of the monetary aspect of things, right? And the owners of those businesses benefit. The practitioners don't really benefit because they're so overloaded with 30, 40 clients. And then the client doesn't really benefit because they're not seeing their physio for a tremendous amount of time. So it's all well and good to say, oh, well, we treat one-on-one or we see you for longer. But how do you do that now with a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot facility with those op costs and rental prices? And again, meet ends meet when your physios are seeing 10 clients instead of 30. It's a really unique problem to solve. And I think having different streamlines to the business and optimizing performance testing, strength and conditioning, and the medical side of things really helps because you have multiple revenue streams. But that's also why we've kind of gotten down the educational route and stuff like that as well, is we're just trying to kind of diversify as much as we can. So in Canada, outside of like the facility, it's very like province by province with its regulations.
Yeah.
So whether you're in British Columbia or Alberta or on the East Coast, you're going to run into different constraints in terms of how you can set up your business, right? So in BC, there was a well-documented kind of kick up with insurance not too long ago where they were kind of debating classes being classified as physiotherapy. So small group training couldn't be really put through benefits as physio. And they quite often were citing, well, there was no modalities or hands-on work. And that's why it's not physio. So now you're like diving into like, well, what is the definition of physio? And like, where are we even going with this in 2025, right? So just unique things that you're kind of dealing with across the board, province by province. Even like, it's different over in the UK, I know, but in Alberta, you can order, physios can order diagnostic imaging, x-rays, MRIs, ultrasounds. You can't in other provinces. So just unique constraints like that to overcome. And I think if you were a business where you were going to expand Canada-wide, you'd be having to figure out different solutions regardless, or kind of depending on where you found yourself too.
Taylor, obviously from the S&C side of things, for you guys and where you're at, how do you sort of distinguish your model and your environment as being good from an S&C perspective? How do you make it stand out there?
Yeah, I mean, S&C for us is, I always joke, it's the Wild West. We've got no governing body. You can take a certification and have a group that maybe guides some things, but it is completely the Wild West. You can have weekend certs that are running rehab. You can have people that have absolutely no clue with no repercussions to do anything. So it is a very messy space. And I think what I've learned the most from being involved in the physiotherapy side of things is just realizing that constraints or a governing body can be really good in certain aspects because it gives a sense of quality control, but also on the physio lens, that doesn't mean that it's going to be really good care either, because we see that on both sides of the coin. So I think for us, we really had to look at what our individual business is and what our needs are as a business. And I think the complexities of having a rehab to performance model, you do need really switched on coaches, and you need people that can understand both sides of the coin, because there is going to be certain acute things that might trickle in at mid and end stage, and having that coach have the ability to recognize that and realize what we can do to troubleshoot it, or bring in, again, the team aspect and bring that physio back into the mix. So we needed people that were really going to think outside the box as a coach, be very good at communication and having a sense of empathy for the journey that these people are going on, and ultimately individuals that can guide it through that whole process. And I think what I've learned as well is that traditional education is a checkbox for a lot of people, but I've thought long and hard on this, and that I think what university teaches us is this, it almost drives this information aspect into us, of that we're constantly taking on information. And I think when we're done university, it almost keeps that in the back of our mind of like, don't stop. You need to read, you need to do this, because that's what we've done for the last 8 years of university. And I think that's a really important skill for people in this industry, is continually wanting to upskill. So for me and my team, that's what I look for. I look for, first and foremost, amazing people. And are they A players, and that they want to go above and beyond for the athlete, and they also want to continue to develop themselves? Because I think when you have those two sides, it's a really special place where really special coaches can be developed and brought forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess, you guys now have the knowledge and the benefit of hindsight for your business and kind of like what's worked. And I feel like whenever you open any business or start a business, what you sort of plan and think at the beginning inevitably changes, and you pivot along the road, and assumptions that you make at the beginning quite often pan out differently. There'll no doubt be people listening to this show who are at teams or not at teams, but potentially want their own facility either way one day. Is there anything sort of in hindsight now that if you guys were starting your business, or you're starting ORKA now and you had the benefit of all the lessons you've learned already, is there anything you do differently or be able to get to quicker, in terms of like ruling out mistakes along the way now?
I've got two off the top of my mind that I think I would dive into. Is if I were to do it all over again, I would double down on people. And I think in Good to Great, they talk about having the right people on the bus, and they also talk about having the right people in the right seat. And so I think I would double down on really trying to figure out what type of people we want in our business, what's going to move the needle the most, both from a athlete standpoint, from a clinic culture standpoint, from an outcome standpoint. So that's one that I would double down on, is like really make sure we get our interview process right, so we get the right people, and give them the job that gives them fulfillment, reward, all of the different pieces that might encompass what burnout is in typical. And then the other side of the coin is just blunt transparency on cost to run a business. And Trav kind of briefly alluded to the margins, but I have a lot of gym owners or aspiring gym owners come up and, they're talking about, we're doing 10 grand a month. And it's like, okay, now you look at ORKA and it's 20 grand a month just to keep the lights on. So we're 10 grand away from even just turning on the lights in this facility. So we actually have to take such a deeper look at the business side of it and realize how many different levers we have to pull on to generate revenue. Because when you get into this type of model with longer appointment times, with a big facility, it is so expensive. So that would be a big lesson for us. And you might get hit with certain fees that you never even knew about, where a landlord does an adjustment and realizes that they paid 90 grand for snow removal. And now you're hit with an $11,000 bill the next day to clean up that deficit. So it's just, again, there's so many different pieces, but that would be my two, is like, get the right people and know how expensive it is before you go into it.
I love that. It's really helpful. I'm aware of time. Where can people find ORKA? Where's the sort of channels and places to find you?
Sorry, guys. Basically on everything. We've got we've got at ORKA Performance on Instagram, TikTok. We're on LinkedIn. We're doing all the social channels. And so, for me personally, just Instagram is where I'm probably most busy. Just YYC Strength Coach. And I'm always an open book. So my email is taylor@orkaperformance.com. And if you guys have questions or anything like that, then reach out. We love connecting. So
cool. One of you mentioned a course earlier for professionals. Do you guys have some kind of, is it like a business or is it like a technical course? What do you have in that space?
Yeah, so we've got two live events right now. One is Plinth the Podium, which is more of like what we call our generalist course. So we're taking, practitioners, coaches through ideally how we look at rehab and performance from start to finish. And then we've also got the ACL Summit, which is a deep dive on ACLs. And it was a 3-day, 8-9 hour a day course that was jam-packed. And so we do a full weekend on how exactly we rehab an ACL. And then, just working towards a couple other online offerings. But we've got a pretty good base there for education content too.
Cool. Very cool. Well, guys, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for putting up. The listeners won't know this, but I've had building work being done while we've been having this recording, so hopefully it comes out smoothly for the listeners. Thank you both for putting up with that as guests, and it's been really good to connect with you both.
Thanks for having us.